subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined is boundless. So I'd now like to invite Councillor White to provide a karakia.
Nā te te mana, e koutou ki ngā memo kauni toi moana, me ngā kaimahi hui mai nei tēnei rā, me ngā hapori, kei te mea tuki atu, te kariki o popo, te kariki o te kauni hiro toi moana, e noi tātou. Kei te atua nui tōnu, ko mātou e nei, noi atu nei ki a koe, ke tau mai te māramata ki a mātou whakarite mō tēnei rā. Arihina hoki mātou e ki ai te oranga tōnu ki ngā hutanga katoa, ngā tangata ko tō mātou rohe whānui tōnu. Amen. Almighty God, we ask that you give us wisdom in the decisions we make here today and give us guidance in working with our regional communities to promote their social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor White. Apologies, we have an apology received from Councillor Eaty and we have an apology from Chairman Leader who is going to be late. He'll be here after morning tea, and that's why I'm probably as the chair. Are there any other apologies that people want noted?
Happy to move.
Thank you. I'll create a seconder. Thank you. I'll put that motion on the paper. Aye. We did have an item in the public forum, Mr. Gordon Dixon. Is Mr. Dixon in the room? If not, we will hold that over and perhaps if he arrives later on, we will afford him the opportunity to speak. We have no items that are not on the agenda, and I see Councillor Thompson is on Zoom. Welcome, Councillor Thompson. There is a slight change to the order of business. Item 10 is going to be held over to the end of the meeting. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest? Thank you. We'll move on. There is no public excluded business to be transferred to the open. And so now we move to the minutes, the Regional Council minutes of 4th of May 2023. Are there any amendments or matters arising for the minutes?
Happy to move that be true and correct.
Second that.
Thank you, Councillor Douglas and Councillor White. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We also have Regional Council minutes for the 25th of May. Any amendments or matters arising for these? Could I have a...
So move.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston and Councillor Scott. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And we have the extraordinary Regional Council minutes of 9th of June. Are there any amendments or matters arising? Yes, Councillor.
Oh, just on page 31, Mr. Chairman, we opted for option 2, Madam Chair, sorry. We opted for option 2. I just want to make sure that we're ready to go live 1st of July, please. The Crown said they'll do this. We've gone the extra mile. Are we all ship-shape to go live 1st of July?
Thank you, Mrs.
Yes, I can give that assurance, Councillor. We are ready to go live on the 1st of July.
Great.
Any others?
Happy to move, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Winters and Councillor Thurston. We will move that they are true and correct. Put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So we are fortunate today to have 2 presentations, and the first one is on our school sustainability and resilience funding program, and it's been presented by Stephanie McDonald, Stephanie Healy, and the team from Carroll Girls College.
Kia ora koutou Chair and Councillors and all in attendance today. Ko Jackie Healy, tōko ingoa. I'm the Community Engagement Advisor for Toi Moana, and I'm here with Stephanie McDonald, Team Leader Community Engagement, and Namita Natish from Tauranga Girls College. And we're pleased to report back on the 2023 School Sustainability and Resilience Fund. Small scale fund that has given us an opportunity to connect and empower our community, and in particular with our youth. It's the second year running of this fund, and it's been a fantastic pilot program for engagement using the participatory budgeting tool, or we like to call it the PB tool. We've provided you with information throughout the process via the Councillor Weekly Update, on Participate, and via our social media platforms. We'd like to acknowledge our appreciation and thanks to Council for the opportunity to run this fund. We'd also like to thank those that have applied in the community and everyone that has been involved. And today we'll briefly highlight some insights of the project and also welcome Namita, who is going to share her personal experience on the youth panel. The idea behind PB is to empower the community to do the thinking and voting themselves. We provide administration and coordination of the project only and try not to influence in any way. Applications started coming in pretty fast when the fund opened in late February, and these were uploaded to our Participate page ready for voting. We had plenty of cool projects that aligned with our community outcomes with a focus on sustainability and climate change. And just looking at this slide, I really love showing off all the graphics that our team do, and I'm always really proud of those. Just wanted to make a note. So early April, it was time for our applicants to promote their own projects within their communities to get the most votes that they could. And this can be a challenge for some schools, and so we like to think that we can help with advertising the actual project and links on our social media, in the papers and on Participate, as well as word of mouth. Once the voting opened, the community had 4 weeks to make their votes count. This year, we showed the running total of all the schools and the projects so that it added a little bit of competition and a bit of motivation for them. So we confirmed now that we have 12 successful applicants that came through on the public voting round, which was awesome. And that was a total of $35,000. However, that meant that there are still 22 important projects that did not receive funding. And we understand that this process takes a lot of time and effort, takes planning and costing and getting quotes and checking that it aligns with our community outcomes and the long-term plan. So a lot of thinking and work is involved. So we also understand that some schools and communities are smaller than others, and that PB may not necessarily seem like a fair process for them and their size and their marketing capability. So this is why we've included the youth panel, both in the 2022 round and the 2023 round. So it's a really good chance, a second chance vote, we call it. And before we head into the information around the youth panel, here's a little view of the fund last year and this year. So both years we started our thinking that we would put $35,000 towards the fund, but we got so many applications both last year and this year that we increased the budget spend to $50,000. Both years we had heaps of applications, we had an awesome amount of votes, and we really, really loved having the youth panel come in at the end to add their contribution. Building on last year, we opened the fund a little bit later to allow schools time to settle in for the year. And we also offered up to previous applicants who were unsuccessful that they could reapply using the same project if they hadn't quite got off the ground. And that was a really good example of making sure we looked after all the applicants. This year we have certificates of acknowledgement for the schools and for the youth panel, and we threw in some prize vouchers also for those applicants that didn't quite make it through in the voting, just to help get them started on their projects, trying to spread the opportunity for everybody. And then we have the youth panel. So this photo was actually taken about 3 seconds after I said I was going to take it. So it's really good. And then we thought, sweet, we've got that sorted. So sorry, youth panel. We put the call out for expressions of interest for our youth panel after the public vote had closed. Really quick turnaround. We were hoping for at least 6 youth applicants, and we got 16, which was just fantastic. Of these 16, we wanted to ensure that their experience was valuable and that they would have the chance to learn and grow during the process. And they only had 2 weeks to build their knowledge, share their ideas, and then vote on the remaining 22 applicants. They're all very passionate, as you can imagine, and a very motivated group of people. They told us why they applied to this panel. They wanted to have a voice. They wanted to meet new people. They wanted to meet like-minded people, make a change, and they all cared about the environment. So very, very cool. And I'd like now to introduce you to Namita Nitesh. Namita is 13 years old. And I was just telling Steph, we were sitting there, that when Namita was born, I started here at Regional Council. And today is our first day of presenting to council. So that's pretty cool. Namita is Year 9 student at Tauranga Girls College, and she was an integral part of the Youth Panel Forum and attended all the Zoom meetings, and we're so pleased she's put her hand up to come and talk to council today. Over to you, Namita.
Kia ora koutou, the chair, the elected members and the council staff. Ko Namita tuku ingoa. I'm a Year 9 student at Tauranga Girls College, here to represent the SSRF Youth Panel and share my experience. I was the youngest panel member and would like to thank the community development team, Jackie and Steph, for allowing me to be part of the panel. It was fascinating to connect with other youths from different schools and backgrounds. The best part of the panel was looking through the applications and reading about the different projects that applied for funding. I learned a lot about participatory budgeting from being on the panel, which was an excellent educational experience. I also had the chance to collaborate with other panelists while participating in the panel, which helped me understand their points of view and to get a better perspective of other ideas. This has enabled me to understand, respect, and value being part of a team and appreciating other people's opinions. Being part of the panel also helped me to know more about the likely impacts of climate change. The recent events of Cyclone Gabrielle are an example of the impact of climate change. My opinion is that we all need to work together to ensure that our communities are sustainable and resilient to the effects of climate change. The applications for the SSRF funds were a great insight for me into the creativity of our young tamariki. All the applications were impressive and showed how our future leaders are taking the issue of climate change seriously, and they're using their creative skills to protect their communities from the impact of climate change. Additionally, I want to thank you for giving me the chance to speak about my experience in being a panelist.
Kia ora.
Would you like to ask any questions? Through the chair.
Thank you. Any questions from?
Kia ora. Thank you. Awesome to see you here today. I think this is really exciting and good on you. And what I'm really interested in is, how do we harness the energy? 16 people jumped in to put their hand up, said, yeah, I really care about sustainability, climate action. And so for me, it's like, this is a really good indicator that the youth in our region are really engaged and passionate. So for me, I don't want to see that kind of curve off and lost. I want us to be able to connect with that and engage with that ongoing. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't know whether you've got any ideas, or you guys, but I'd be more than happy as a councillor to come and listen to your questions in your schools, to really engage, and maybe that can build momentum, because it's a bit of a scratch record, but you are the voice of the future, and this is a fantastic program, and it would be a shame to see that momentum and energy lost. So yeah, any thoughts?
Kia ora through the chair. Thank you, Councillor McMillan. There are a number of initiatives that we have underway in terms of supporting young people to connect with volunteer opportunities. You might have seen the Youth Hub that was shared through the council newsletter to provide a channel for young people to connect with decision-making opportunities like the youth panel, community grants, other grants that they might like to apply for. So absolutely looking to reconnect with youth. But if you're comfortable to answer the question, Namita, is there anything that you'd like to see council do more of, that you think council do more of to support young people?
Not really. I think you guys are doing a good job.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because we really want to connect with you guys. I think sometimes, people can say, well, I feel really disconnected from local government, and that's not just our young adults. People generally can feel that. So anything we can do to be able to break down those bridges is really important to us as well.
Oh, Councillor White.
Yeah, tēnā koutou, tēnā koe, Namita. Thank you, Namita. You know, it's a challenge to face this group. You did very well. You know, when you look around the table, we're all very much older than you. Your generation that will be sitting around this table in the future. Do you have some words for this council that you would like to share about the future you see? Sorry to put you on the spot.
The future I see. I don't really know what to say.
Environment wise?
Oh, environment wise. I think it's all good. I think maybe people can contribute more. Community service, I do some of it. That helps with my service hours.
Thank you. Community service, a lot more volunteers and appreciation of volunteers maybe.
Councillor Scott.
Welcome, Namita. It's great to hear from you. Look, early last century, when I was at school, I read something called the public notices, which was a thing called a newspaper, and was there saying, "Come and join in a youth committee for the Hamilton City Council." And sort of about 75 years later, here I'm involved in politics. So there's your future. My question is, probably public notices are not the place where you heard about this. Can you explain, where did you hear about this? Is there what's the ideal form of communication the council might use?
I actually heard about this from my mum because she works at the regional council. And she said, "You want to be a part of this funding youth panel?" And I was like, "Sure, why not? This can be useful to my school in like leader roles."
Well done. For those without mums here, what would you recommend?
The next best.
Probably to like look at the news or maybe go onto the website to see if there's anything on that you can contribute towards. Yeah.
Thank you. There's no further questions. I'd just like to note, I'm aware that Namita's mum is in the climate change team, so it's really important work. And I'd like to thank you, Namita, and Stephanie, and Jackie, to come take the time to come and talk to us today. It's really rewarding to us to see where people are getting engaged and helping us in our way. So thank you so much for coming today. Thank you. So next item is a presentation on the camera system, the TS plan, the TSP as we call it. And I'd like to welcome Dean Clifton and Sean Jones and Michael Seaborn here to present to us. First, before we start the presentation, Councillor Thurston, the opportunity to say a few words to explain why we invited you here today.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and a very warm welcome to you, Dean and Sean. It's good to have you here. I know you've travelled some distance from Auckland to be in Whakatane today, so that is acknowledged. You'll note there's a number of new faces around the table, and I chair the Regional Transport Committee, and there's been a lot of questions asked since the last election in October about some of our interrelationships with entities such as UFTI and the TSP, which you lead, of course, Dean. So I think it's fair to say there's a degree of confusion, perhaps even misunderstanding about your roles and responsibilities and your functions. And I know you'll address that in the course of your presentation. But I think our biggest concern is duplication. The Regional Transport Committee brings a regional-wide perspective to manage transport. We understand and, of course, appreciate that this area of work that you're committed to is particularly Western Bay. But I know you'll talk on alignment, duplication. I know the delivery cost is huge. And I've also fielded a number of questions from tangata whenua within the Western Bay as to where they fit into this. What are your communication channels with tangata whenua and also with business? So I would love, Madam Chair, if this sort of presentation can be somewhat conversational, because I know most of my colleagues around the table have expressed a desire to get down to the nitty-gritty, hear from Dean as to what are what's the raison d'etre, for want of an expression, of TSP and the work that you're doing in the Western Bay. So welcome again, Dean and Sean. Good to have you here.
Oh, kia ora, councillors, and thank you very much for having myself, and I'll include Mike on that, because Mike's an important part of TSP, and he's also an important part of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council. So that's a good list of issues, and I think we will cover off many of them. We do have a short presentation which might still be useful just to give you some context of TSP. So the presentation we do have talks about the purpose of TSP. It'll talk to where it fits, both with respect to smart growth and UFTI, but also to each of the partner organisations. It will also give you a feel for what some of the key issues are that we see coming up, including the refresh on that investment program, which is really important in order for us to be able to give you the quality of advice you require in making decisions around the Regional Land Transport Plan, or RLTP, and the Council's long-term plans, or LTPs. So maybe if we just use that to get at least some core content in, and then more than happy to pick up on these issues of duplication cost, our relationship with tangata whenua, our relationship with business. Would that be okay if we...
How it all feeds into the Regional Land Transport Plan and alignment. I think the operative word to take away today is alignment with an exclamation mark.
Yeah, okay, look, got that, and that's at the heart of everything we're trying to do with TSP, alignment. Say it 3 times, alignment, alignment, alignment. So if we don't get that, then we've got nothing. So I deeply understand it. And I believe that what we did with the first version of TSP into the previous RLTP demonstrated we can achieve that alignment. So we're very focused on delivering the same process and outcome again. Mike, did you want to say anything, or we're good to go? Okay. Actually, I'm not control of it. You are. So I just thought, take a moment to reflect on this, but this is our core purpose. We acknowledge that the region's changing. We acknowledge that transport is simply an enabling infrastructure investment for you to achieve those broad spatial outcomes for both the Bay of Plenty, but also the Western Bay of Plenty. And TSP at its heart, and this is why it was created, looked to take from those urban form transport and outcomes, UFTI outcomes, and give delivery of the transport component focus. Okay. And at its heart, it's that collaboration between central and local government, tangata whenua, and business. So all those parties are represented in that group. And it uses a collaborative environment with a delivery focus based on data, based on facts, based on research, to provide all of the partners, of which you're one, a view on how to ensure that your transport system investments will deliver the very outcomes you're after: housing, equity of access to the transport system, economic outcomes, social outcomes. Okay, so if we can just maybe go to the next slide. These are the entities at the table. These entities represent the governance group. Okay, so you've got Waka Kotahi, you've got Tauranga City Council, Western Bay of Plenty District, Kiwi Rail, the regional councils there, Priority 1, and they're there to represent the businesses through the Tauranga and that broader Western Bay of Plenty area. So look, we've got iwi there, and we've got Wayne Belby is the representative on behalf of iwi Partners, and we've got the Port of Tauranga. And the port brings that sort of very industrial, freight-based voice into the conversation. They're not just as the port in their own right, but that area is significant in the way that the transport system works.
But Dean, there's no politicians involved, are there?
No, there's not. Okay, and maybe it's a useful time just to talk about governance in that respect. Would that be helpful? Well, but I reflect this is my view on it.
Yeah, I wanted it to be conversational.
Yeah. So, in my experience, when you clear political governance, and there's responsibilities around political governance, but TSB is about delivery of those transport system outcomes. And so TSB and the model we've currently got is executive and program focused, okay? So it's taking those political governance decisions and settings. So what are our priorities as a region and as a sub-region? Where will we invest within affordability constraints? And TSB is constructed to take that political governance and those decisions that you make collectively across each of the agencies and give effect to that. So it's not a political steering group. This is a executive delivery focused group. So that's the difference. We are executing what you have agreed at political level. With that comes responsibility to keep you informed of progress, adapt to issues because things change, and get the decisions that we require that will enable delivery. But I don't see it as a political governance group. There's quite a few political governance groups as they already stand at the regional and at the city and district levels. So I've always kept a distinction between the two groups, but that's my view, and I don't.
The problem we have as a region is that we do rely on the political side. There's such funding constraints in our region, and the transport funding isn't enough under the I can't think of the word for their normal funding. So it's pork barrel politics. It's project by project based, and we can have all the greatest theories in the world, but if we don't actually have the political will to actually fund them and get them there, then we're really struggle to achieve. So we're really happy to look at growth externally as well as intensification to Papa Peninsula, for instance. But if we're going to go out there, we have to know we've got the funding so that our infrastructure is appropriate. And what you're saying this is a delivery vehicle, but you are so reliant on funding, and pork barrel politics is the name of the game. And we're somehow what we have to do is change the funding model because we cannot rely on one-off funds to do things. We actually need certainty. We need a long-term plan, and I can't see how the transport system plan has the same problem. It's how you get the actual delivery so that everything's done in a timely place. And we as politicians are extremely frustrated as a result of the current funding model.
So I can give you a couple of reflections on that, Andrew, if that's okay. So all of your concerns are very familiar to me.
Sure.
Yeah. At many levels, because that's exactly what we're seeing around New Zealand, is what we're seeing in Auckland. Maybe I'll flip it around a little bit if I can, in the spirit of conversation. If I think about delivery of an investment program, what would it require from political governance to be successful? And what it requires from political governance to be successful is that we've got agreement on the outcomes we want for the Bay of Plenty, including the Western Bay of Plenty. That's smart growth and UFT, okay? You prioritise your spatial growth and where you want to grow and when you want to grow, okay? And then we come and have a look and say, as technical advisors, to enable those outcomes, where should the transport system be and what level of service should it offer? How do we get the mix right between roads and private vehicle use, freight, public transport, active modes, etc.? Okay, and that's what TSP does. It says, in the context of what you're trying to achieve, transport system investments as an enabler, this is what we recommend you do. Where you've got congestion, what you need to do to unlock that. Where you've got active modes, where and what you can do. Public transport, likewise. Then you've got the question is, that list will always be greater than what you can afford. And so the other thing that TSP looks for political governance and leadership on is, okay, we've got a big list now. How much can we afford to be doing? And so we'll give you guidance on how to prioritise that list, but you ultimately make that decision through the RLTP process, okay? And through the LTP, the individual councils. So we're very reliant on giving you the outcomes. We give you the advice on what you need to do to invest. If you've got limited funding, this is the prioritised order. And then you decide how much you can invest and you draw a line effectively. And we'll tell you what the consequences are of that. The big debate, though, and I think you're touching on this, is the revenue and funding model for transport system investments across New Zealand is not adequate for our needs, okay? And that's a separate debate, and that's something that has to be taken up with government and Ministry of Transport, because that is not adequate. I've spoken with other audits about that. But that's not something that TSP can deal with. That is something that politically has to be resolved. That is revenue and funding sources to enable. Our job is to think about how to deliver it and as effectively and efficiently as we can and as quickly as we can. So I've tried to flip your question into how I see the political governance and delivery focus working and where responsibility lies.
And I support what the TSP, don't get me wrong in that, but I do. But the problem that we also have in this region is we really, the model that you're espousing has that smart growth after in between us, which is the political arm. But to me, that's where that's where we've got a broken model at the moment, and we've been asking for it to be reviewed, because what's happening in the Western Bay region is we have commissioners go to Wellington separately, and then Western Bay District Council goes to Wellington separately. You know, when we started Smart Growth back in the early 2000s, we did it as a combined group, and Stuart was there, and we had half a dozen of us went to Wellington, and we got really good traction because we were seen to be aligned. Now we have, we have the ministers coming in on Zoom who don't actually, who want. So it looks like it's engaged, but they're not really actually engaged. And so the models, it's not TSP that's the issue in my view. It's the level above, the political level above it. We actually have to get more integrated, and we need help with that, because it isn't that's the level that's not working rather than TSP. So I haven't got an argument with you on that.
I don't want to be over defence about TSP. I'm clear what it should be focused on if it's going to deliver for you. Okay, but I acknowledge that there is maybe some confusion at the political relationship level between smart growth and individual. Sorry.
I could just comment here. I've got Councillor Shirley and then Councillor McMillan, but we did have a smart growth meeting on Tuesday, I think, where it was first times I can remember, where we had all the politicians from all the three councils sitting, and a representative from Tangata Whenua sitting together around the table and deciding on a prioritisation and between the top three projects, and also deciding, endorsing that the leaders of the three councils would go to Wellington together to actually make presentations on those projects. So we are getting there, Councillor Condartison, but I'd like to pass the baton to Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a first term councillor and I'm still getting my head around this stuff. But I am the Deputy Chair of the Regional Transport Committee, and I have to say the disjunction, or what I perceive as a disjunction, has been deeply troubling to me. And I certainly get the distinction between governance and execution, but what we seem to have done in this region, we just seem to have a plethora of duplicated bodies, you know, the UFTs, the TSPs, the Smart Growth, all these initiatives. And while you can sort of academically sort of see why they were done to sort of facilitate execution, in many respects we've created Frankensteins. And you've got all of these Frankensteins coming up with their own power and governance and direct channels, and the disjunct between the governance role, the politicians, and all of these separate bodies. And of course our staff have got the job, they've got to service them all. So there's a sort of a duplication and a frustration there, I'm sure. And that meeting that our chair referred to was the first time I had sort of some hope that there is some light through this very black tunnel that I'm trying to navigate. It was very encouraging, but I only found out about TSP quite recently, quite frankly, as Deputy Chair of the Regional Transport Committee. Now that's appalling. It might be a reflection of me, but I just keep getting these three-letter acronyms everywhere and whole sort of monoliths of bureaucrats with different channels not talking to each other and going down different paths. It's very confusing and it needs to be tidied up, and it does come back to alignment, and I do recognise the problem. And the other concern I have is actually a personal one, but how on earth have you got the time? You've got Auckland Transport to sort out, and I've also given you the job of trying to sort out the Bay of Plenty transport, and I see on the news this morning that our congestion is greater than Auckland's congestion, so I don't know how you can do both, quite frankly.
Sure. Well, let's touch on a few things there. Yes, we do have a lot of three-letter acronym entities in the Bay of Plenty. I can understand coming in it would be confusing. I understood there has been a review of Smart Growth and its relationship with the entity councils. To be fair, I've also thought that the relationship between the transport system, TSP governance or oversight, and Smart Growth is strengthened.
That's interesting. Oversight, not governance. That's very interesting.
Well, yeah, I'm using oversight because governance is such an all-encompassing word. Governance, we've got project level governance, you have program governance, you have political governance, you have executive. So I
That's where the problem lies, though.
One word that covers many forms of governance. So I've just tailored my language to reflect that. But I'm very clear, political governance is different from delivery governance. The role that I have filled at a personal level is to chair the TSP activity, and so from that point of view, it's been something I've managed for quite some time. And when I took up this contract with Auckland Transport, I agreed with all the parties that if they wished me to continue, that I felt that I had the time and capacity to do so. So that's my answer regarding how I balance. So the conflict, I don't think it's conflict of interest, it's conflict of time and how I manage that. But to be fair, the issues that you're facing are very similar to everywhere else in New Zealand. So, and they're no different to Auckland. You have an investment priority challenge, you have a funding challenge, you've got all the issues with your transport system. So these are familiar issues to me in both roles. And now the question remains for my relationship with TSP is whether I can continue to add value and provide the guidance. I felt that I could, and that was agreed, and then I guess time will tell.
Thank you. I've got questions from Councillor McMillan and Councillor Scott. Then I think we'd best get on with the presentation. So I'll pass it there.
Thank you. So it's later on in your presentation, but you've got the networks and plans worked out. So then Do you, and that's 0 to 30 years, and obviously you've explained, you know, the sort of political leanings to prioritise those projects up in smart growth. But does that mean then you dissolve? Because it sounds like you're the expert infrastructure technical side of it. So if you've come up with all these plans and these are 0 to 30 years, what then are you doing? Are you continually tweaking those plans due to community consultation and tweaks, or is the work done and then you step away? That's what can't quite work out. What if you've already worked it all out?
Well, it's worked it all out and you continue to work it out because policy setting change. So maybe I'll just give you a short example. Nirvana would be that you didn't need something like this because actually every contributing party did what you agreed. But we've talked about collaboration. I do have a personal view. There are some parts of collaboration you just have to institutionalise to make sure that you collaborate and you continue to collaborate. And so TSP brings all those parties together that you saw on that slide to make sure that when the regional council maybe has a priority on transport investment, that you've got Waka Kotahi and you've got Tauranga City Council and Western Bay Plenty Council providing the matching infrastructure. So the question is, how do you best achieve that over time at the program level? And that could be TSP, or it could be something else. It doesn't have to be TSP. Yeah. But if we reflect back 3 years ago, OFTI was imagined, transport investment outcome required. We needed to get some sense around what those were, the priorities and how much you could afford. And we took it through the RLTP process, and that was agreed around this table, all those that make that decision. And we're going, since that time, we've got new government policies, we've got new funding constraints, we've made progress on certain investments, and so we've refreshed our view on what the model is, where those investments need to be, the priorities, who needs to be doing what, and we'll bring that again to this table for decision making through the RLTP process. So there is a role for this integration. It doesn't have to be TSP, but somebody has to bring us together to make sure we're having an integrated conversation that integrates all those investments and then ensures we do what we say we're going to do.
And is that not UFTI then? So,
UFTI, in my world, UFTI is a plan. UFTI is a plan. UFTI isn't a thing that does anything. It says what our priorities are, but it doesn't actually. It's not resource. It doesn't deliver in the way that TSP is designed to be the delivery responsibility.
What's the point of UFTI?
Well, it's essentially the settlement patterns and the transport that connects the settlement patterns. It's a plan. There's a plan that looks at urban form and transport and says, with the smart growth outcomes in mind, how do we think about urban form and transport? And it's a plan that gives us priority and sequence and tells us where things will happen. TSP takes the transport piece out. It says, okay, we are now going to deliver on that plan. The plan doesn't do anything except to tell us where we grow and the order. It's a plan on, it's more than a plan on page, it's a document taking that and delivering a component of it. I've simplified that as much as I can.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that is a blueprint, and the most important part of that blueprint was that we, as a group of partners, agreed on connecting all that together through that document. So it's a representation of how that all fits together, so officials and your staff and others and most of the councils can work to it. And that assists collaboration. It assists the efficiency of that delivery model and allows us to proceed. Because a lot of questions happen at the staff level that are that need alignment, and we need direction from our governance, political governance as well, for us to get on. I think that's what UFTI serves for us as a North Star with regard to how we do transport and the settlement pattern. So it's very, very important. Just to add also, Dean, this type of vehicle TSP is not uncommon in New Zealand. It may represent a failure in how transport is structured, but at the same time it's everywhere because there is a need for one like this. So in Wellington, let's get Wellington moving. Auckland had an Auckland Transport Alignment Project connecting Dunedin, the Greater Christchurch Partnership. This is a very, very common way of connecting
political governance and your councils together so that they can work together in alignment. So this is not uncommon for New Zealand. It's actually potentially a system failure, but at the same time, it is very much needed, particularly in urban areas where the problems are complex and costly, massive impacts across our communities. So without it, we can't speak with one voice, certainly not upwards or to our communities. So that's really, really important. And it's very important that delivery vehicles focus on delivery, time, cost, quality, get it done. What's the order? Otherwise, we don't get momentum. We can't build the sector to respond. We don't have that forward sort of certainty, which everybody needs, not just us, but including our providers. So more strongly for something like this to be in existence. If it wasn't TSP, it would be something else.
Thank you.
Councillor Scott, and then we'll let them get on with their presentation.
Thanks, Mark. I don't know if you've addressed any anxieties I have by comparing this to getting. So I'm going to make comments that you might want to, rather than answer directly, sort of refer to as you go through your presentation, because I'm thinking about the alignment, the relationships, and I look at the business aspect of the group here, which really represents the big end of town compared to the tradies or the businesses along Cameron Road or Hewlett Road, the people trying to do work within their work day. When I look through the plans, I see references to private car use, see references, and there's reference to getting freight through the city. There's talk about modal change. I'm wondering, where is there reference to the electrician trying to get from one job to the next job, and that travel time is unpaid for them. It's dead time. So it might be something you refer to as you're going through, but I don't see in the relationship group small end of the business town, if you like, represented.
So we'll pick up on that, but I can think of two somewhat indirect, if not direct, ways that we look to address the needs of the individual contractors, the smaller end of town. So why don't we pick up on that on the way through? If we don't, I'll come back.
Thank you.
So you've got alignment here, which we've talked about. You see how we're trying to fit within the current governance structure. We've had a discussion about the relationship between smart growth and political governance. That's not on this, but I'm very aware that there is political governance complexity that sits outside of this slide. I think we talked through this to the extent we need to.
Just has a bit more detail on the right around the governance within TS organisation.
Yep, correct. Next slide. So I'll just pick up the first slides here. So this goes in part to the question before around why does TSP as a entity responsible for executing exist. So as you come into each RFP, what we want to do is assure you that we've thought about where we're at as a transport system. How are we getting on delivering against those objectives? If you think forward over the next 10 years, what are the investment priorities? Okay. And we want to give you that advice alongside each of the councils. Tauranga City Council is going slightly ahead out of sequence. So what is our advice to them alongside of you for where the investment priorities might sit? And so to do that, we refresh the operating model that sits underneath this. So how are we performing as a transport system? Where are we at with the individual investments? What are the changes in government policy? And there has been a significant number. How would they influence those investment priorities? Okay, so we touch on all of those, and then of course we think about what will be priorities, what's achievable, how much funding have we got, how affordable is the program. Effectively, we give you advice on where to draw the line. We acknowledge there's a significant number of pressures as we think about the transport system and the investments needed, so you can see those up there. So there are very targeted policies around emissions reduction and vehicle kilometres travelled reductions, and there's work going on those in parallel. We know that we've got some significant housing affordability issues and housing provision issues, so we're mindful of all of those and the relationship between transport, land supply and affordability. We've also seen significant construction inflation, which you'll be aware of. So if you had if you had $1 billion program this year, you'll need 1.1 next year to deliver the same thing. That's what's happening in construction inflation. We also know that there are very significant funding. There is very significant pressures on the National Land Transport Fund, which will flow through into your RLTP. I think of Waka Kotahi Zone of Mission, that we're getting close to the point where the NLTP is likely to be able to fund renewals and maintenance and selected other investments. The government's created a number of other capital sources which we can then tap into if our investment priorities align as sources of funding. So it is a more complex funding picture. It's not just coming through the NLTP anymore. It's coming through probably half a dozen capital sources, and that's to reflect that the revenue model coming into the NLTP is now inadequate to deliver. With electrification of the fleet, you're getting less fuel excise duty, for example. As we reduce vehicle kilometres travelled, you're going to get reduced road user charges. So we have to rethink the revenue model, which directly informs the funding. Okay, and as we've gone through, of course, we better understand our investment priorities. So those are some of the key pressures that we've reflected alongside how the system's performing. Next slide. So I might hand over to you, Sean, just to quickly dash through these, and then we'll just come back and check that we've got.
Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm Sean Jones, TSP Program Manager. I've probably met a number of you on different presentations that I've done, so I'm going to quickly run us through what we've been doing on updating essentially the prioritised program. So we've been through, this diagram really talks to the methodology that we've followed over the last 6 to 8 months, where we went through looking at the operating gaps in the system, making sure that we understood our objectives and incorporated recent policy changes, etc. We then took that initial piece of work, reviewed the program and refreshed it. We undertook some modelling, some cost reviews, maps, and then we've packaged it up into what is the program that we've seen in the document, in the attachments. So one of the key things we did at the beginning was to take the so what we did in the very first workshop we did is we looked at the investment logic that we were using. So initially the original TSP had 3 objectives. One was around access, one was around safety, and one was around enabling urban growth. So what we did is because of the focus on emissions, we pulled out emissions as a particular objective, and we incorporated sustainability into the urban growth component, made freight more explicit. And just to touch on your point, Ron, your question around the smaller end of town and the small businesses and access, that was one of our key conversations when we were talking about access. So we've made sure that when we're looking at our investment objectives, we're thinking through how is this going to enable the need to use the transport network for work purposes. How are we going to make sure that they're able to use that system? So, go to the next slide.
Just in terms of our input there, with regard to the RLTP. So the RLTP represents a similar process. And with regard to this, we work with the TSP team because they're ahead of our timeline on these objectives, and we look to see alignment flow through into the RLTP. It does not mean they'll be the same. So the RLTP is an independent process that this will fold into, and this becomes an input into the wider consideration across the region. And I suspect there is where the RTC members will be able to balance their attention and focus on the different objectives that are in that process. But staff at a operational level are working through what is the measure, what does that actually mean, and how do these fit together? So what we're trying to do is make sure we get as much alignment as we possibly can. But again, the RLTP process is something that is developed and will be developed over the rest of the course of this year and into the next. And councillors at that table and the RTC will get to prioritise the regional program, of which this will be a part. And what this represents, though, is if you flip back to the other slide, is a large, credible process to develop the evidence base for investment. So on that previous flow chart, at the end of that flow chart, there's two little boxes, and they go into LTPs, they go into RLTPs, and other funding sources. So to leverage any kind of funding outside of the region and within the region, the evidence base needs to be there. And so this what the TSP is able to do then is to show very methodically the prioritisation, the whys, the wherefores, the data that supports that, the system performance, and stitch that together with the land use to show a credible plan. And I think not only ourselves, but Waka Kotahi and any other agency funding in this area will want to see that, particularly in an area where the issues are much more complex perhaps than our other areas. That's not to say that that's not true, but we will discover that as we go through the RLTP. So I'll give you an example. I think resilience is an issue, might end up being on the RLTP table and RTC table as a higher priority perhaps than given in the context. And that's something we'll manage through that process, but I don't think that means they are both not important. It's a broad church and we're able to focus on several things. So I think that's something that will play out through the process here. It's just that we have this level of information and this level of prioritisation and evidence earlier. And I think that's the way that staff intend to sort of manage it and make sure we stay stuck with this process as we move through.
I would like to ask a question. One of the criticisms that Smart Growth has faced is that there was limited consultation on AFTI, and I'm not aware of any consultation on the TSP. And of course, we're busy working on a refreshed Smart Growth strategy. The consultation process will be later on in the year. So, given that the TSP is going to fold into the RLTP prioritisation process, is that where the public get a say on what these projects are to them, or is TSP also going to have some sort of West Bay consultation process on prioritisation?
In terms of the TSP program, not only do they the communities get consulted with regard to the RLTP, and so yes, we will be talking about it in that space and projecting the LTP, particularly with Tauranga City Council, which is LTP has gone a lot earlier than everyone else's. There's another place where the local share funding for TSP has to be consulted on as well. Having multiple consultation phases is desirable, but I think that those are the steps which we take in order to make sure it stays connected with the community, particularly with this. If TSP was to have another one, I think it would start to confuse things. So best the councils and the partners use their current processes in order to talk about the investment that's required in order to bring TSP into life.
I know you've got Councillor Sherman. Can I just say, at the end of the day, this is a regional process, the RLTP. And I've got to once again put on record how grateful the TLAs in this region, and I hate the expression the elephant in the room, but Tauranga's issues are the elephant in the room, let's be honest, in terms of transport and functionality and, infrastructure. And you'd help me out there, wouldn't you? The mayors, you've been there, you've sat at the table, Councillor Von Dettelson, you get huge support. At the end of the day, but at the end of the day, it all floats to the surface, and it's a regional decision that is made by the mayors and their representatives around the region. Sorry, Madam Chair.
That's right, Councillor Shirley.
My question first, though, the diagram here, one block back, and those next steps, the two steps you've got, and you feed into the LTP, you feed into the RLTP and the NLTP. The other big box and the other initiative of the next step is the VKT reduction program. My question is, given the current and anticipated growth in the Western Bay region, sub-region, how realistic is that VKT reduction target?
We've just started, so in terms of a quick VKT update, we've been provided establishment funding from Waka Kotahi to commence the VKT reduction program work. And through that work, we're going to be able to answer that question, because at the moment, some people say that you can do it and some people say you can't, but we need to do analysis of the options and understand the gap between what the target is and what we can feasibly achieve.
Has it been done anywhere in the world?
So maybe what we do this piece of work to understand what the options are and what can be achieved. But general consensus is, and I'm of this view, is that the VKT target, reduction targets, I can't see how they will be achieved with growth. Okay. So, but that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't be looking at how we manage growth in vehicle kilometres travelled or emissions. So they're both worthy objectives. The question is, how do we manage that growth? And therefore, what sort of investments do we make? Okay. So it does inform, and actually, just to be really clear, government investment is aligning around achieving those objectives. So if we don't address those objectives, then it's very hard to get some of the funding that you require to deliver transport outcomes. So just to be really clear on that.
It's a worthy piece of work, because what we'll find at the end of it is and where the investment is going to achieve or contribute towards motor traffic down.
We'll keep going.
Yeah.
We will pick up this.
So we've got a summary of the program. It covers a 30-year, $7.9 billion plus the PT Services Investment Program. There's 84 projects. I won't run through the full list because I know we're constrained on time, but essentially that's the scope of it. We've included the 10-year program there, so that you can get a picture of what it looks like for the RLTP discussions. So the program itself, which is the output of TSOF, which is the Transport System Operating Framework Model, consists of 4 tables. So we've broken it down into committed projects so we can get a visibility on what we're currently building or planning or designing to build. Complementary projects, because there's a lot of interdependencies here, and so we wanted to shed light on what are those interdependencies. We've got strategies, policies and studies, which are not actual physical things we build, but they're important to set the strategy and policies environment. And then we've got the list of activities. So I've included in here the lists. We won't run through those in detail, but they're included in the pack. And we've updated the executive summary, which is the public-facing document that was prepared for the first version of TSP. We've refreshed that, so that was included in the pack as well, and that will be the document that's updated on the website, so that it's available.
Click through these slides.
Yeah.
So that's the committed. Those are in flight. That's a demonstration of the progress that we expect from the Refocus program. These are the complementary projects. Sean, is there anything you want to highlight?
I mean, it includes a lot of spatial planning. So, and it just reinforces the point before that this program delivers on the spatial outcomes that we're after. So there's a lot of integration work happening there. Actually, no, there is one here. We've included a network and system optimization study. So this is going to be a piece of work we want to initiate fairly quickly, which is going to look at where we can get quick wins across the network to improve public transport activities and service levels in the short term. So we're seeing this is part of that active management approach where we're looking to try and make sure we're making the most of our investments over time. And this is the full list of the program or future projects.
It sits below that investment line.
They've been, I'll just go back to that. They had, just to explain how we have done this, aligned with the RLTP process. We've prioritised based on high, medium and low. So as Mike said, we've had a very collaborative relationship with the RLTP team as they've developed their investment logic. And it includes so that's the main categorisation, high, medium and low. Everything else in there is it's not in a particular order. So just to clarify that. And then
Just if we move on for that, just looking through that, some of the numbers of what it's going to cost seem sort of hair raising. How are they sort of finger in the air sort of numbers, or are they well priced?
We did a robust costing process, so we've had quantity surveyors with significant experience in pricing infrastructure. So just to make it clear, that it was the Becker QS team. Having said that, a number of these projects are unscoped. So some of the projects, you've got a gap in the system, and so you make an outcome that you're after for that. Like for example, Papamoa, from one end to the other, they need multimodal corridors, but there's no design for that. So there's some methodologies that you use to create some high level estimates. So some of them are at that level. Other projects we have a lot more detail. So we know it's a corridor with certain characteristics, and we can provide an estimate of the costs. And then in some cases, we've actually got detailed business cases where we know the cost is forecast pretty accurately. So
Just to give some assurance, this is normal practice.
yeah,
So feasibility all the way through to construction, the certainty around your cost estimates gets greater. And so some of these will be feasibility level and early stages, and so the plus and minus will be much, much higher risk. And you work in the process to reduce that risk and then get more certainty around costs. So in the pipeline, you do have cost ranges quite a lot, so that you can sort of anticipate what risks you might see and how they manifest within a project.
So I'm looking at $3 million to work out the road pricing. That seems wonderful.
is that in the strategies and policies table?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that's a business case process that's quite complex and significant in scale.
So
it is an expensive exercise.
Yeah.
So when we look at the 7.9 billion over 30 years, let's break that back to 263 million every year of the 30 years. Now, if we look at history, we're not even going to go close to there. So, it's all very well to have a wish list, but we have to have some realism as well. So if we're not going to get 263 million every year for the next 30 years, what do we have to drop off? And have you looked at that? Have you, are these properly prioritised as to what would? And I don't think this is only the inner workings of Tauranga, close Western Bay. When we look at the entire transport system, like State Highway 29 needs work all the way through to Cambridge. So, how do we do this? I mean,
I think just a couple of points now. I'm sure things have other things to say as well, but the 200 million, the greater than forecast annual expenditure, is almost what we're already spending. So TCC is spending a lot of money on transport infrastructure. I'm not saying that we're going to get all 7.9 million, but there is already a big investment program, and so the big question would be how do we keep that going at the same level and increase the value to be able to cover the gap. So that was just my main.
Yep. So there was an existing investment program, circa 200 million a year. This is not all of what you consider in the regional long-term plan, RLTP. We acknowledge that, but what we will give you is our advice on how you prioritise investments for the Western Bay. Okay, that's simply what we do. It is an RLTP and it's an RTC committee. You will consider all of the things that you need to invest in for all of the Bay of Plenty. Confident that we have thought for the Western Bay, which includes Auckland City Council, of course, what those transport system needs are. Okay. And what we know is, based on the last time we did this, is that we gave you that quality of advice and you took it into account for the whole of the region. When you made your submission for the national, to Whakatane nationally, 95% of what you asked for, because they were confident in the quality of the work and the prioritisation that took place. And so we know that the process and the quality of input and the prioritisation and the fact that we brought all the parties together and we've got agreement generally around that prioritised investment, that process works. That's the process we'd like to bring you this time as well. Okay?
Councillor Shirley, I'll
Just on that,
and then we'll.
just on that point though, Dean, that would have worked fine if you still had the hypothecated fund, National Land Transport. But now with all these other buckets which are becoming more significant, it's become more politicised. So you're getting now sort of smart growth going direct off to talk to ministers to access other buckets. You've got Kangaora throwing 45 million in for Omokaroa roundabout or whatever. So you've got all of these, what was a united regional position is now a very fragmented chains of access, but also recipients. So it's getting very confused.
So just very quickly on that.
And then you've got the special development projects of Kangaora as well, which have an overarching regional planning function.
So the change now, from my point of view, standing in the shoes of TSP, is that the quality of the model becomes even more important. Okay? You have to have confidence, you understand the link between transport, investment, and all the other outcomes. And whereas before, through the RLTP, it was a pretty direct line, or your source of funding. It was the NLTF. That doesn't exist anymore. But the quality of thinking has to remain, because now we go to the NLTF and we'll go off to CIP and you go to IFF and you go to Kangaora through their SDP. We've got these other channels, but the quality of the model actually becomes equally, if not more important.
Yeah, so it's even more important now to have that.
If you don't have the logic, then you'll never be able to demonstrate the investment outcomes. And so I think in the core, we've got a really strong core and it's acknowledged as a good model. We would like it because it's less complex and less costly for there to be one funding relationship, but that doesn't exist anymore. And we need to address politically, you need to address that. We can't as TSP, our job is to get you the quality of advice.
Just to add to that, sorry, there were some lessons learned out of the last preparation of RLTP, and we're moving to make sure that we identify funding sources through that process as well, so that we are broadening our horizons as a preparation of a regional plan, and that's certainly one of the.
So I'm going to speed through these. I'll do them in 1 minute, I promise. Okay, so we've talked about the investment priorities and you saw those slides. Just remember there's a spatial context to these. So you can see we understand where your priorities are for growth and development. We understand how that will turn up in a, for example, public transport network over the next 30 years. So we put this into a spatial context so you can see that we're thinking about the what and the where and the when, okay? And I think we've touched on these. You do have a high quality model. I want you to walk away confident of that. That informs everything that follows from here when you go through the political governance processes. You've got a really strong collaborative model. It's got all the partners at the table, which is fundamental. We're seeing, even with government policy, that whilst we've seen some change in investment priority, there's been significant shifts. So that tells us that and we're acknowledging those funding pressures. And on that note, there's a few more steps to go and we're finished.
I'll open the floor for a few questions. Firstly, I just want to thank you, excuse me, so much for coming in because you clarified a lot of things for me and I've been around a while, so you are what to do. But I really have appreciated your time and your presentation. So, Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. So I'm just probably a bit of a advocacy plug here. So I see that in 30 years, still won't be able to cycle to Pookie, and we've got a regional park, Papamoa Hills, Te Upu Regional Park. My vision is that somebody could cycle either from Welcome Bay or from Papamoa to visit that park, and I see it's not in the plan at all. And look, I know this is down at the consultation phase, but it's just not joined up to our assets, I suppose, if I put it in that. And then also that you could, in 30 years, you still couldn't get a bus from Welcome Bay directly to Papamoa without going, you know, you have to go back into town and back round. So it's like this, it's like, I don't know if you can see, but there's a triangle here, and this bit here is not connected. And yeah, so I just, I suppose it's a bit of a, as I say, a plug, but I would love Papamoa Hills to get there by bike without getting killed. And to Pookie, because people want to visit to Pookie by bike.
It's a good plug.
Thank you.
Last chance. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Can I say thank you very much, because I really enjoy the opportunity just to share what I think is. We're passionate about delivering an awesome outcome for the Bay of Plenty, okay, no question. And in this case, it's got a Western Bay flavour to it, but if we don't get this part right, the relationships interregional and within the broader region will fall over. And always happy to engage as much as you want, because this is such a big lever on achieving all those other outcomes you're committed to. So thank you very much, and just keep asking, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, councillors will adjourn for morning tea. So we have 15 minutes for morning tea.
With me.
I wasn't allowed to open my mouth. He's wanting to come back. How?
Want to get him?
Oh, I knew I had plenty of time, but I was in this
Thank you, councillors. We will reconvene. In doing so, we'll move to agenda item 11, Chairperson's report. I'll move the adoption of it. Seconded, Councillor Von Dickinson. All those in favour say aye. Case carried. Any questions? Oh. 11.2, adoption of the annual plan for 23-24. Been circulated.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So this report and the accompanying attachments essentially is the culmination of work carried out by elected members and staff over the annual plan process to and the content essentially reflects the direction provided by yourselves through the series of annual plan workshops that commenced towards the end of last calendar year up to this point, and the decisions you've provided through your deliberations meeting last month in the annual plan and an extraordinary meeting held earlier this month. So essentially this report is seeking council to adopt the fees and charges and the annual plan. The only few items to note in regards to the content of the annual plan in relation to the financial prudence benchmarks. There were 3 benchmarks that is not met. One is the unbalanced benchmark, which is essentially in accordance with Council's financial strategy in the long-term plan, the prudence approach to financial management. And the 2 other benchmarks that were not met is the rates affordability for general rates and targeted rates. And the reason why those 2 are not met is because for the purposes of reporting the financial prudence benchmarks, the limits are actually the rates percentages and dollar values that were proposed in the LTP for year 3. So in the annual plan, the rates percentages and the dollar values are higher than what those proposed rates and dollar values were, and hence they are. So just to give you an insight as to why those benchmarks are reported as those results.
Thank you, Byron. Councillors.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. On page 37, I have for the executive summary, 185 million capex expenditure, 30 million, and getting down to the nitty gritty of 5% rates increase, plus inflation and growth, 7.95. Now, amazingly enough, and I won't go into that part. No genius in accounting, but 95 adds up to me. It's pretty close to the 13% that was told to us by our management originally. And it all sounds great, $39 per household, but in reality, and you know as well as I do, particularly in the east and around Portuguese, that is not what the household budget is going to be. It's going to be a lot higher than that. And that is what really concerns me. I have to put that on the table because if I'm in that situation, I'd just like to hear some views other than that from me. That concerns me a little bit because it sounds like we've gone around in circles and back to where we were and when we talked about the annual plan or talked about rates right from the start. Thank you.
Any response to Councillor Campbell?
Just in terms of the work program set in the annual plan, there is
the headline rates numbers essentially is reflecting the levels of service that the council has envisaged through the LTP and refreshed through the annual plan process in terms of its commitment to the community, and exercising rigor and financial prudence through assessing your headline numbers through the workshops and decision-making processes prior. And the headline numbers we see for the rates is effective if in essence reflects the levels of service and commitment you're making to the community through your LTP and what's consistent with that through the annual plan process.
Councillor Von Doddleson, then Councillor Crosby,
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned when I see the big box that shows a 5% rate increase and it's $39. Well, I'm sorry, but let's have a look at the two figures that really matter. Wakatani, 11.9% rate increases. That's the one that's going to hurt the people of Wakatani, and that's a $90-something increase. It's not a $30 increase. Take Tauranga, 1 point lower at 11.8%. That's a 63% increase, not a 39% increase. And what this highlights to me is that because of the targeted rate, we're out of kilter. We've got a situation where Rotorua, and lucky for you guys in Rotorua, you'll be able to go to your community and say, I'm giving you a -1% rate rise. And aren't we good? And then you come to our jolly meeting and say, we want public transport free for everybody. And who's paying the $63 extra? We are, because it's Tauranga ratepayers at 11.8%. We've got unaffordable rates in Tauranga, unaffordable at 63. It might only sound a little bit $63, but $63 to a lot of our ratepayers who are retired on fixed incomes are really struggling, and we're criticising Tauranga City for bumping the rates at that sort of level for them. And I'm thinking as we go through, Mr. Taylor, go through the work programs, I never in my life imagined we were going to end up with an 11.8% for Tauranga. You know, and call me dumb that I didn't actually go into the detail of it in time, but this is actually unacceptable, and it highlights to me, we can't do much about it now, we've got this far down the track, but by jingoes, by the time we start the long-term plan work, let's have a review of targeted rates, because it is out of kilter, and it shows you've got, Car Round, 9.5% rate increase. Apotiki, 5.2%, so they're not too bad. But these are communities that are all struggling, and good old Rotorua is struggling. Good old Rotorua, -1%. How did you manage to get that across? You're very clever.
We bring a regional perspective, Councillor.
You're very
weighted into Tauranga.
Mr. Von Doddleson, will you finish?
Hell,
please.
Can I just say that in conclusion, I find this really disappointing, and as I say, because I actually hadn't got into the detail of it enough, obviously, and I've got to be more alert in the future. But 11.8% for Tauranga, 11.9% for Wakatani is actually, in these times, we're in a recession, and we're not cutting our cloth. We actually have to look at efficiency and effectiveness of our organisation. We can do better, and we can still do the things we want to do, but we've got to be much more astute in how we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Von Doddleson. Before I go to Councillor Crosby, could I just remind councillors that this is a culmination of a journey that we have been on. And if you're understanding that your previous discussions were not going to lead to this position, then I acknowledge Councillor Von Doddleson's position of saying that we should take for
detailed focus over where this is going to end up. So the Chief Executive would just like the opportunity to respond to comments made by Councillor Von Dales, and then I'll come to Councillor Crosby.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Some of the actions we will take is to work with Audit New Zealand so that we don't have to present the rates they are as at the moment. We'll work in the long-term plan in terms of those real rates increases versus the full rates increase, which we're bound to in this long-term plan. And I remind councillors that in the direction that you have given previously, you have asked for efficiencies and effectiveness, and we have delivered that for you as staff. This budget includes a significant number of reprioritisations, which you have asked for. You also asked for us to use all reserves possible to reduce the rates impact, and that's exactly what has happened. The example that you've given in terms of Rotorua public transport, they've been using the reserve that was there for public transport, hence why that increase is what it is. So across your workshops over the last few months, you have certainly asked for myself to deliver efficiency and effectiveness, which we have, and also in terms of looking at every avenue possible in terms of reducing the rates increase. We acknowledge that going into your long-term plan, we will have to look harder in terms of that, because this long-term plan was built to respond to COVID, and so this council has been using its reserves, and so those are now diminished. So I completely acknowledge the next long-term plan will be a different kettle of fish, so to speak. We no longer have the reserves that you once had. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crosby.
I just have a simple point of clarification. And it's around how you treat growth and inflation. And how you I'll get the inflation part. But in a previous life, growth, the language was growth of the rating base, which was equal. So inflation's a cost, and yet in my thinking, growth is a benefit. So how do you treat it in this particular perspective?
So
175-ish.
So yes, you're correct. That is growth in the rating base. So as we use that, it depends on which metric we're looking at. So if we're looking at total rates across all of council, growth, that percentage, we have more cost in there being collected. However, what the individual ratepayer sees on their rates bill is growth makes their individual rates bill smaller. So that's why when in the logic of when we talk about real rates revenue, we subtract the inflation and we subtract the growth to get a view on the real increase on the individual ratepayer.
Just supplementary to that, Chair, I always have an issue with how we use an arbitrary number of inflation, where we all know that our inflation in our world is variable compared to apples and oranges and petrol. That's what you're using, the CPI. But however, that's again a debate, I think, for the LTP. And I guess my final view is this is what it is. We need to keep moving. But the LTP this term is going to be absolutely critical in terms of having an in-depth view of what our priorities are and how we're going to fund them.
Councillor Lees.
Thank you. The actual annual plan document, are we still able to make a change, editorial change? Just on page 25, funding our work, we do refer to Quayside Holdings making a significant contribution to council revenue with $45 million. In the past, we've actually quantified that as an amount that is distributed to each and every ratepayer, and I think that's been quite a valuable message. So could we add something in like that to that last paragraph?
Councillor Lees, and the communication that was sent out yesterday to the public captured that number. Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sort of taking a bit of a helicopter view in a way. I'm not going to sort of justify it by how to explain this to the struggling bourgeois of Omokararo to Puna, but rather just the observation that local governments' rate increases for many years have been totally out of kilter with other elements in the economy, and there's a lot of public comment and talk back on that. And we seem, and you know, the economy is in tight situations. People are really hurting. And other jurisdictions and other territorial authorities in our region are sort of, I understand, around that 7% in absolute terms. Whereas we've sort of got the luxury of sort of distinguishing it and realising it's only 5%. But no, it's actually 13%, 12.95%. And the other aspect that really concerns me is the rundown of the reserves, that deficit in the OPEX. You just can't keep doing that. So are we living beyond our means? And I appreciate the CEO's comments about, you know, cutting where you can. It's pretty tough, I know, to make those budgets and try and cut the cloth to suit. But have we taken that helicopter view and looking at, you know, is there too much flab structurally? What is it? What's driving it? Because it's not a sustainable model when you look at it, is my view. And this is in a tight year. You know, if this is the best we can do in a tight year, we're in trouble.
Thank you. I'll come back to answer that. Councillor Scott.
Oh, look, it's been an interesting process going through for the first time. And when I look at rates increases over the last few years, so we've had 14% in 2018, 11% in 2019, 6% in 20, only 3% in 2021, and 11% in 2022, and then another 11 point something percent this year. It's a cumulative growth. It's not just 11% this year. It's getting on for double over the period. So then you ask the question, why is that? And I think that there's no doubt that central government is asking us to do more. So we're not doing the same amount with more money. We're doing much more and therefore need more funds. I get that. I think there's also important that we do address our levels of service. Is excellence the standard we want, or is very good enough? There's the question about where we make sure that we invest sufficiently so we don't end up in other councils we could name where underinvestment has caused us problems and all we've done is kick the can down the road. So there's a lot of things to juggle, I get that. In terms of this year, it is what it is, but I think it's really something we have to look forward going forward. Questions about our culture around this table, around in the organisation and in our general community. So these things, we're really going to have to take a hard look at ourselves in the long-term plan. It is what it is for this year.
Thank you, Councillor Scott, and your commentary about this organisation and the culture and taking a hard look at ourselves, we seem to repeat every time we come to setting the rates and where we want to spend the money. In terms of answering Councillor Shirley's question, I acknowledge, and the reality is that many in our community do not have the luxury in terms of their disposable income of having everything based off inflation. They have to make do with less. However, we need to appreciate that in this organisation, a significant portion of the overhead that's related to inflation is the cost of staff within this organisation. That's just a fact in terms that as a government group, we're all aware of, and the opportunity to revisit that comes at the time of the renewals. Councillors have frequently asked the question of why do we have inflation plus costs? Well, I think the organisation at the request of councillors has essentially approached this on a zero-based budgeting approach. So it's not as if the organisation does take the rate of inflation that it adds on top. Within the cost centres in the organisation, there's an expectation, as the Chief Executive said, to have a zero-based budgeting approach the expenses that we have. But ultimately, the decisions in front of you today in terms of the adoption of this annual plan have been workshopped, they have been deliberated, and this is where councillors wanted to end up. And that's why the proposal is in front of you today in the manner that it is. The opportunity, and it's been made, that the past behaviour of utilising reserves to offset what should have been approached in terms of a rating increase cannot continue. It's not a new phenomenon in this organisation, but it's one that councillors have taken the opportunity and the approach in terms of exhausting those reserves. Now, we've done that. So as the Chief Executive has said, in your LTP considerations, you're going to have some hard decisions to be made. And it's essentially, you increase the revenue or you cut some levels of service. Any further questions?
I'll move the recommendations, Mr. Chairman.
It's moved by Councillor Crosby, seconded by Councillor White. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. Move to the separate paper, which is setting the rates for the 23-24 financial year.
Councillors, this report is in keeping with the adoption of the annual plan resolutions for council to set its rates to support the annual plan. And essentially this report sets out council's general target rates levels for the 23-24 financial year and due dates for payment of rates and normalization of penalties. The report also sets out the appointment of local authorities across the region to collect rates outstanding from the year 21, 22 and prior for that administrative function to continue. So essentially that's what this report is seeking for council's approval today.
Thank you.
Just the uniform annual general charge, is that set at the maximum of 30% under law that we're allowed to?
Just under 30%.
Just under 30%. Okay, no, just making sure.
Any questions, councillors? I think, Kamara, it's fair to say that in terms of especially a lot of these targeted rates in terms of the river schemes and drainage schemes, they have been consulted with persons who are at the receiving end of these targeted rates. And it's probably a good process, but it's a lot easier to get to these people than it is to the general population in terms of the comments made earlier by Councillor Von Davison in terms of public transport. Any further questions, councillors? Otherwise, Councillor Nees, happy to move. Seconder. Councillor Crosby, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you. 11.4, making proposed change 5 from the river to the regional policy statement.
We have Julie Bevan and Lucy Holden online.
Want to talk to this one through the chair?
Sorry.
I'm happy to talk to this one.
Yes, please.
Tēnā koutou councillors, well, you do have Julie Bevan as well as Lucy Holden online to help present this paper to you. We're on page 77 of your agendas, and we are seeking your approval for change 5 to the regional policy statement, which is the Kaituna River. Now, this is a significant decision for you, not just because of the years it's taken to get us to this point, but it does look to fulfil our responsibilities under the Tapu Claims Settlement Act, which is to recognise and provide for the vision, objectives and desired outcomes in the Tuna He Taonga Tapu Iho, which is the Kaituna River document. It is also significant in that it is the first in New Zealand to go through the freshwater planning process, which was adopted in 2020. And also key is that we have had no appeals on this change to the regional policy statement. So it is quite a privilege to be here today seeking your approval to this change. And I will just see Lucy or Julie, do you have anything further to add for the councillors in their consideration?
Nothing from me, thanks.
Happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Nees.
Oh, I would just like to congratulate Councillor Von Davison, who sat on that panel and made such good decisions. It Everybody agreed with them, so. Ready to move.
It's moved by councillor Lee, seconded by councillor White. Further discussion, all those in favour say aye. Against, carried, thank you. 11.5, Mr. Groom.
Morning, councillors. We are considering your decision to adopt the 2022-25 for Toi Moana on page 83 of your agenda. I understand that there's been rich previous discussion on this document that predates my time in the role, so hopefully I've faithfully captured your deliberations in this document. I'm happy to go straight to discussion. I'll just briefly note that the Deputy Chair provided some helpful feedback yesterday around some inconsistencies in the voice of the document and other grammatical matters. I don't believe, but feel free to correct me, that they affect the substance or intent of the document. But I just thought I'd mention that. So happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Groom. Third time round, councillor Crosby.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies, I didn't have a chance to conversation with colleagues around this. It's okay. But when I was reading again a couple of days ago, page 97 in particular, the principles and some of the bullet points that sit underneath that, are actually principles, more methods. To my mind, the key principle of this should be the principle of natural justice. And there are two component parts I think we should articulate this, which sets the scene, I guess, on how we approach it. The first one is the decision makers must be unbiased in respect to the matters before them. That's a natural justice principle. And the second one, there's only two of them, that the decision makers must provide those affected by the decision the opportunity to be heard, which is in there. That's in there. So if you wanted to, I'd just quietly restructure that. They have the key principle of natural justice, and don't call the bullet points principles because they're not actually methods. And I guess that then leads into, if you accept that, and I'm talking about the position here, not the people, there can be times where either the chair or deputy chair can have unconscious bias because they may or may not be working with colleagues for over a decade. And don't tell me and sit there that they're actually unbiased. So I have a concern that the filtering mechanism that proposed in option 2, I think it was, is to go to the chair in the first instance and tick that box so it can go down through the process, as opposed to going straight to an independent one. But I don't think we need, I think we should try this in the first instance because it's just practical and it's more effective, cost effective to be honest, rather than rushing off as some councils do to engage, frankly, a lawyer at $1,000 an hour. I don't think that's really necessary. So I'm quite prepared to run with option 1 in the first instance, but we should monitor it if the occasion occurs, and I frankly don't think it'll occur in this triennium, that we can run with that, but just keep a monitoring eye if it turns up and how it's executed. But I would like to see those two principles of natural justice clearly articulated in there, because one is and one isn't.
Crosby for that advice.
I just have one reference, which is on page 172 regarding what is lawful and unlawful regarding the Human Rights Act. And we seem to have rewritten it a wee bit. I'm not allowed to refer to Councillor Thurston's writing here. The human rights, if we're going to refer to the Human Rights Act, we should use what's in there and not use the Wikipedia equivalent. So I think we should tighten that up and have what the law says rather than something else. Page 172 is a little table about towards the bottom.
Has Scott any other commentary? Well, yes. See, this is not the first time this has been in front of you. It's adoption of the status quo.
Move the recommendation.
Please, thank you, Mr. Campbell. Seconded Councillor Winters. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. 11.6 LGNT agreements.
Well, you're not rid of me yet. The local government NZ AGM is on 26th of July. We have five voting rights. 11 remits being considered at the AGM, 8 of which have relevance to the business of a regional council. We've got staff advice in the attachment. Sorry, this is page 111 of your pack. Staff advice on the 8 remits relevant to the regional council proposing support for all. I would just note that there's some caveats around where some of the remits are worded at the moment. A couple of instances where there might be potential risks that can be mitigated. Not a reason not to support the remit, but just things to be conscious of.
Thank you. The only comment I'd make, councillors, is this is set out pretty well, that whilst this might be a staff recommendation, the recommendation of this council, I think you need to respect the position of the delegates on the day, that if there's new material that encourages the delegate to change their mind on behalf of the council to change the way this is set out there. Councillor Campbell? No. Winters?
Oh, just on page 116, that contribution to KiwiSaver, staff said to support it under your delegated authority, Mr. Chairman. I to hear the discussion on the day. I can't really support that, but you're the ones down there. You can take it under advisement on the day, but from my perspective, I really can't support a KiwiSaver support to councillors. I think it's unnecessary.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Councillor Shirley?
I was going to make the same point. I certainly don't support that. We are independent contractors. To make us to enjoy those benefits of an employee is a big barrier, and I think you open up a can of worms if local government thinks that they can get a special consideration for independent contractors to join KiwiSaver schemes. I just think that's a bridge too far, and it would create incredible inconsistencies. I'd be very surprised if government would accept it for a whole lot of reasons. The other one that I struggled with, or I'm not sure about, is Remit 8, with this establishment of local government New Zealand setting up a local body sort of complaints process. It just seems to be another sort of layer of bureaucracy. We've got the Ombudsman and various other established processes, and for local government New Zealand to actually establish another sort of process of local body complaints, I think is could also become a can of worms. So I think it's one that I'd recommend our delegates to think about very hard.
Can I just ask a question? That in the text for the KiwiSaver contribution, it says that MPs are eligible for KiwiSaver. That was part of the rationale for the.
Yeah, that's not a good precedent, I don't think.
Thank you.
No, remember, the fastest bill that's ever gone through the Parliament, and it went through in 7 minutes from introduction to third reading and passage, was the MP's own superannuation scheme. It went through in 7 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Shirley. Councillor McMillan?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the staff recommendations that we adopt those, and just going back to the KiwiSaver, staff have noted that they think it could potentially incentivise a wider range of people to stand as candidates, and in my mind, if we can do anything to increase diversity of electoral candidates standing in local government, then I fully support that movement. So I'm not thinking about myself here or perhaps any of us around this table, but if that could make a difference for somebody to make the decision to stand as a candidate or not, then I think we should really support that.
Thank you. Thank you. In moving it, Councillor McMillan. Councillor Crosby?
That's fine, thank you.
Councillor Nees? You're done. Right, we've got a mover, we have a seconder.
We're voting on the Please say no, there's a show of hands.
The whole lot.
Your delegates are just taking advice and advisement. Yeah, advisement. Direction to your delegates that the recommendation from staff here is something that you support. We've noted the comments from those who've spoken regarding the Kiwi statement. Delegates need to reserve their position to change the recommendation that staff have given you on the day following the discussion. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor White. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Aye. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Winters.
I'm happy to, I've voiced my opinion, Mr Chairman. You've got counter views across the table, and I'm happy for you to make an executive decision on the day.
Thank you. And just on, whilst we're talking about LGNZ councillors, we dealt with there is the issue of the election of president and vice president. I don't intend to enter that discussion today because that's most of us haven't heard from the prospective aspirants. So in confidence, I will allow some discussion in terms with councillors and seek some advice from those people who are better versed than myself as to the directions or the considerations we should make, because there's no other meeting of this council before the AGM. The views of councillors. Right, can we go through to 11.7?
Go to councillors page 151 of your agendas. So both Anton Coffin online and myself here to present this paper. Just a reminder that we are seeking your approval to the updated Smart Growth Leadership Group Agreement and the Smart Growth Leadership Group Terms of Reference. You'll recall Smart Growth has gone through a refresh. That refresh went to Smart Growth Leadership Group on the 5th of April, where they resolved to approve these amendments to come to each respective council for agreement. Anton, was there anything further you wanted to add?
Not really, just to say that the changes to the agreement and the appended terms of reference aren't substantial. They're more clarifications and bits of updates, including removing some of the spatial plan references and updating some of the language so it's consistent with the operating model you're using.
Councillor Needs.
Yes, Mr Chair, I wonder whether there's been an oversight in the agreement. In the actual terms of reference, there's reflection that the regional council didn't appoint the regional council chair to Smart Growth, and I was appointed instead, although he is available to attend ex officio. But actually in the agreement on page 155 of the agenda, which is 234 on the diligent one, it still references the representatives to be Tauranga City and Western Bay District, includes for the mayors and regional council chairperson. This is in the last paragraph. I just wonder if that's an oversight.
Thank you, Councillor Neese, and it clearly is.
Through the chair, that clearly is an oversight. Certainly the discussions were to remove that line from the terms of reference, so that change hasn't come through. So we'll work with partners to work out how we rectify that.
So have you moved the resolutions?
Yes,
thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor McMillan. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour say aye. Aye. It's carried. 11.8, delegations update.
Yeah. Kia ora koutou. So through you, Chair, firstly apologies for the stray sentence in the summary in the beginning of the paper. But this is really just a procedural matter. There have been some changes within the organisation, and as these delegations under the RMA Local Government Ratings Act and Delegations Act must come from Council just asking you to approve those changes. Questions?
Councillor Crosby, seconded Councillor Shirley. No further discussion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you. 11.9, executive. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, this is procedural in terms we seek the approval of this,
My comment, councillors, is whilst the Chief Executive is on leave, there are some pretty substantive issues that we are dealing with. And Fiona has given us the commitment that she will have oversight, be available by Zoom to help with deliberations in terms of how we deal with some of those issues. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Right, councillors, just before we move into confidential, I think it's appropriate that in the public section of this council meeting to acknowledge the contribution that President Stuart Crosby has made to local government. Yeah. So a bit of the background to the story is that Stuart, you know, his experience and competency in terms of being the mayor of a large metropolitan council for a long period of time. I think when Stuart stuck his hand up for the president's position, there was some disquiet or consternation that historically the position of president has been held by a mayor or a chair in local government New Zealand. But Stuart was able to convince the majority of those voting delegates that the job of president of local government New Zealand has moved in recent times to essentially being a full-time job. And that the ability of aspirants to hold both a mayoral job as well as represent LGNZ is getting increasingly difficult, and some would question and suggest that one or other of those roles to some degree suffers. So that was Stuart's foray into president of LGNZ, and in Stuart's time a lot has been achieved. Time, as you know, I was on National Council, and there was some strategic discussions that Stuart wanted to put on the table, and one that I remember distinctly was the review of the constitution of local government New Zealand. I don't think that has made the progress that Stuart had initially envisaged. It should be made in terms of that time, but that's the nature of the makeup of the organisation. But it's an agenda item that I think whoever is the incoming president will need to accelerate. Another one of Stuart's strategic objectives was to improve the relationship between central government and local government. And credit to Stuart for the ability to transact that strategy, much to the disquiet of some within the sector. And Stuart's approach was it's better to have a working relationship with central government ministers and officials than always be in the corner chucking rocks. And I must acknowledge that with several ministers of the Crown, but specifically in terms of his association and his working with Minister Naya Mahuta, I think it was a very productive relationship in terms of mutual respect for each other, even though there was some disagreement in terms of the processes. As you know, President of LGNZ contains a lot of meetings, and I've made some comment about the commitment to that. Stuart's attended over 200 meetings as president in the time that he's been there. He's presented to the Parliamentary Select Committee something like 25 oral submissions, and as you know, countless media statements made on behalf of the sector. I've made some comments in terms of the strategy that he wanted to put in place and the bold vision, and also went through the process of recruiting and putting in place a new chief executive, and that relationship endures through to today. He has consistently advocated for democracy on behalf of the people, And that decision making should be close to where the impact lies in terms of the government's involvement. He successfully advocated for the establishment and now the final report of the Future for Local Government review to take place. He successfully advocated for change to the requirements to publish personal contact details on electoral advertising materials. And that's as a result of the trolling, I think is the right term, in terms of individuals looking at people who have these positions in local and central government and the abuse, etc., that follows. He managed to delay the introduction of the new emergency management legislation due to capacity constraints and concerns. And as you know, Stuart charted LGNZ through the era of the COVID response as well. National Council, during his term, also agreed to having both Te Maraata and young elected members, chairs, elevated to National Council table, not necessarily as voting, but being present in terms of the learning and the experience that comes from that. And the objective there was to increase the diversity and strengthen the role of LGNZ's internal member network. And he's also worked to strengthen LGNZ's relationship with Tai Tuarau, which used to be called SOLGA, Society of Local Government Managers, and also with Te Uru Kahika, which is the operating body of the regional sector. So Stuart, on behalf of this council, on behalf of our communities who we represent, I'd just like to thank you for your contribution you've made to LGNZ as president in the time that you've been there. And I hope that you are successful in terms of taking presidential campaigns going forward, as successful as yourself, and no doubt you will continue to advocate and give advice whenever you think it's necessary, to whoever that may be. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Chair. If I can briefly reply. I didn't realise I did all that. So it's quite interesting. On Monday, I spoke at a forum in Wellington to the Regional Tourism New Zealand group about the challenges and opportunities in local government, and touched on a whole range of issues. And you're right, I did get elected as president during a COVID lockdown, which was quite a bizarre experience when you're talking to about 250 people that you couldn't see to a screen. But that was just the life and times of New Zealand at the time. And I've said it many times before, and I think we live and breathe it. I've never known such a challenging and disruptive environment for our sector, probably in modern history. But in saying that, there are also a lot of opportunities. And I tend to be a glass half full person and look to see where the opportunities are. I guess first of all, I do want to acknowledge all my colleagues, both from the previous council and this one, because I did effectively ask permission and your endorsement to stand, because I was very much aware of the time commitments. The role itself, you can stand for 2 terms, and I decided, as I let you know, late October last year, not to consider the second term, because, you know, first and foremost in this disruptive environment, my primary obligation is to the ratepayers and residents of the Tauranga constituency and the broader Bay of Plenty, and I never forgot that. So that was the primary reason not to even consider standing for another term. Plus, I saw some new fresh energy coming through, newer, younger elected members who should really be part of setting the scene for the future. So I do want to thank you all for allowing me to take on that national role. I'd like to think that it's been beneficial both ways to bring back that information and I guess insight back into this council and into other councils. And one of the things I've learned over the 3 years is, from the far north down to the deep south, just how different every single 78 provinces are. I could honestly say I couldn't compare one with another and say they're exactly the same. And that's local government. And I hope that as we look forward to refresh local government, and I'll state publicly, it is not sustainable moving forward. That there does need to be leadership within local government in the first instance, and in central government, and from the community who we actually represent, to say that we do need to make some change. That needs to be carefully considered, carefully analysed, engaged with the community to move forward. Because at the end of the day, local government it's not about councils, it's actually about the community. So I did check my diary post July the 26th, I think it is, or July the 26th, after about 3:30 p.m. And it is a bit freer to spend more time here in the Bay of Plenty. But clearly, once you've got that kind of national bug, and I'm sure Councillor Shirley and others that have been at a national level, and Tara and yourself and a few others, just about everybody here actually, you do keep an eye on it. And I think that's really important to participate and use all your skills and knowledge to improve our representation for the community. So again, thank you very much. And I do look for, people say, gosh, you'll be glad when it's over, because it has been a pretty turbulent 3 years. But I will miss the people. I will miss seeing how other councils and communities operate and where they are at one point in time. So I will miss a lot of it. But I do want to refocus here back home.
Sure. Councillors, I'll move we go into public excluded. Seconded.